Hello, hello, hello. Today is May 5th. Yesterday was my birthday. Thank you for all the wonderful well wishes and happy birthdays and the calls and everything that you did to go out of your way to wish me well for my birthday and acknowledge my birthday. I appreciate it. I am so happy to see another year. It's quite a blessing. Um, Talking about Adroit Living and on the Erudition network has been I think 3 years now, or maybe four. I'm not really sure. I'm terrible with dates. I have to have notes, and that's why a lot of times you see me reading. I'm trying to read them notes. So I'm just saying. to so the Adroit Living session of the Erudition network is the session where I talk about mental health as is relative to current events and what's going on today. um so this is a live interactive live stream. I'm nervous all the time because this is just not what I do. I'm normally a background person, but for all intent and purposes, I'm coming out in the open and saying some things. So feel free to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Hi, Sean Anthony. Thank you for being here. The more you guys comment, the less I have to talk. Okay. So I'm just joking. I'm just joking. But I like to talk about mental health because a lot of people have no idea what the link and the correlation between what's going on today and all this mental health that we're talking about. People are like, well, why is that? Why are people talking about mental health so much? Why does that make money sense? Why do we keep harping on those things? So that's why I talk about mental health in a holistic manner, which means that it's addressing every aspect of the person, the whole person. Okay, mind, body, and soul. Okay, so let's dig into it. I'm a little nervous. I'm always nervous on camera. So if I talk fast and you need to rewind, you're not the only one. So if you got to rewind to get it, rewind. All right. So lately, what we've seen is that sometimes when things are not going and they're not moving the way we believe they should, we discover we're in a holding state. But what I found is when you have the it's already done energy, that then things in the atmosphere associated with that energy begin to move in the direction um, as you have directed it to. It may be far away, but it's on the way. The more energy you put into moving like it's already done, the faster it all begins to move to manifest itself to all the senses of awareness, like sight, touch, sound, and finally ownership. If done right, you'll find yourself moving onward to the next advancement while you're still in the holding stage. But don't stop there. Keep going. Don't look back. Keep going forward. And then you'll find yourself triggering the next big thing that you'll do, because that energy is excelling you forward, and you didn't allow your state of awareness limit your it's already done energy. So what does that mean? Um, Thank you, Teddy, for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment. So what does that mean? A lot of times when we feel like, oh, this job isn't moving the way I think it should, my life isn't moving the way I think it should, you find yourself in a holding state. And that holding state may last for quite a length of time. And you're like, well, how can I manipulate things to move the way I want it to? Because sometimes it moves the way I want it to, sometimes it doesn't. And you're not really sure what to do. Well, when we start to move like things are quote unquote already done, then things start to manifest more to our senses of perception, like touch, sound, and finally ownership. So not only are you thinking about it mentally, you're physically working towards manifesting it like it's already done until it is actually tangible in sound, touch, and ownership. And that's what we're seeing a lot of people say, well, I don't know, because sometimes I can get things moving really fast, and sometimes it moves really slow. How can I be more consistent? So this kind of information helps with mental health, because it's like, I know I'm not going crazy. Sometimes it does. I think of something and boom, it happens. The objective of it is to understand how to keep it moving more consistently so it can improve your mental health. So you're not like, man, I know there's something I did before. What was it that I did? Well, what you did was you kept moving in that direction like it was already done. So the idea that you had is now manifesting itself step by step, not all at once, but sometimes it's at an appointed time that it's going to manifest itself, to the fact that it touches all the senses of perception and awareness, such as sound, touch, and bottom line, ownership. So keep moving in the direction that you want to go, so that when you finally arrive, whether it's at that appointed time or it's because you've already been moving with that same it's already done energy, and now you got it, it's manifest physically. But you might, because of all that energy that you put in it before it fully manifested itself to the ownership level state, you might have triggered the next big thing. And now you're already moving in the next big thing. So don't stop just because your ideas have not already reached the full manifestation and being realized to ownership. Keep moving forward, because you have no idea how that's going to help your mental health when you constantly moving instead of staying stagnant and waiting for, well, this stage isn't done yet. Well, this phase isn't done yet. Well, we can't move on because of this. Keep moving, because it's going to improve your consistency to manifest these things to the best results. So now, some people watching, you might have to rewind. That's okay. You, as long as you get the understanding. Some people are now feeling like, oh, now I understand better what it was that I did. I just couldn't remember. I'm only reminding you, you live adroitly all the time. We just don't really put words to it. So you're not sure how to, be consistent with it. That somebody else is probably feeling like, oh, I felt like I was alone. I was the only one. Now you have information that says you're not the only one that's going through that. Now you have ability to be more consistent in manifesting the things that you would like to see more often. I know it sounds crazy sometimes, but a lot of times if you just put it to the test, it'll work it out. Now, let's relate that same information to current events, so we can see how to be more consistent in achieving mental health that we want to see. So let's see how all that saying it's already done mental energy relates to current events to exhibit relevancy and link mental health awareness. I know a lot of people are like, man, if I can take that information and apply that to everything in my life, every aspect in my life, then I can feel a lot better in my mental health. I can improve things a lot better if I can apply more consistency in manifesting things to its full awareness, sound, touch, feeling, and finally ownership. How can I do that? Well, lately, we have noticed, for example, a lot of truckers, they went and they were like, well, I'm going to go into the trucking business because I've tried to work the system and work a 9-to-5 job and it just didn't work out for me. So I'm going to go into trucking for myself. I'm gonna be my own business person. I'm be an entrepreneur. I'm going to learn, get this DCL license, this trucker license, and I'm going to start to control my own wealth, control my own ability to generate what I feel is a successful life and produce for myself and my family. And so they went out to be truck drivers. But now today we are seeing a large number of truckers are losing a significant amount of money. How? Well, we're seeing this tariff war and the effects of the tariff war. And we're seeing that a lot of the shipments that were being passed via the truckers delivering these packages, going to the docks and getting it loaded on and driving wherever it needed to be around the country, around the world even. We're seeing here in America that those same truckers are now losing a lot of money because they don't have the ability to get those loads and take them anywhere anymore. So people are no longer having that kind of mental health from that they had when they had the ability to control their wealth and their job ability. And they're like, man, I don't know what's going on. And they're struggling mentally. They're struggling and having a positive mental health. People no longer need to wait for studies to make reports on or wait for quarterly financial reports to know what direction investors are must go. So the people who were truckers and decided, oh, that's a good investment to go in, that's what I'm going to do in order to generate wealth, they're now saying, man, I can't generate the wealth that I was getting from doing that. Now the truckers are selling their rigs and ending their dreams of financial freedom and success looks further away than when they had a 9 to 5 job. And that's really a detrimental impact on a lot of people's mental health. Unfortunately, there's far fewer 9 to 5 jobs now due to the government decisions that we're seeing where, you know, it's the domino effects of downsizing all of America. A lot of people may not know what downsizing means. Well, in business, what people do, they call it downsizing. They take these people who have these jobs and they start to say, well, we can cut costs if we have fewer compartmentalized positions. And instead, all of those different compartmentalized positions, instead of having each person have a task, well, we get rid of half of those people and keep the other half. And that workload that was given to the half that we got rid of is now put on the remaining people who are still employed there. So downsizing is not necessarily historically is not been desirable. And we're seeing that now on a broader scale when we're starting to see the federal job losses, when we're starting to see a lot of federal cuts. Those cuts are exactly that. They are the downsizing to cut costs and cut spending. And that's the mentality of downsizing all of America. It was at first the pilot studies took place via various corporations and industries and to include schoolings and businesses across genre. Now we're seeing it on a country. And the whole country is starting to be downsized. And those things that we saw in the studies for businesses which implemented those same ideologies, we're now seeing it on a much larger scale. And the conclusion of that downsizing mentality ended up with a lot of loss of loyalty, and it corrupted the foundations of the organizations because the lack of money and security and consistency in producing desirable outcomes, such as increasing wealth, increasing consumer support and patriotism, and basically functioning in a manner in which was sustainable for a longer period of time than what we are projected when we're entering the ups and downs of financial gains and losses. So it also had a facet that a lot of people didn't really talk about. It had a mental health capacity, which depleted a lot of people's mental health because they were like, you just cut my job. Now I'm out of a job. And I had work evaluations that were significantly high, but you cut my job. Then a lot of people said, well, the employees that were still there, they said, well, you're putting more pressure on me than I can stand, more pressure than what I thought this job would entail, which is what kept me here. But now I don't want to be here because now you're putting more pressure on me by overtasking me, overworking me, underpaying me. And now um I'm in a situation where I'm more stressed out than what I ever was, despite the normal stresses that were already there. So a lot of people are like, this downsizing thing just did not work. But via mimetic isomorphism and absorptive capacity, which is the method in which business, and the reason why I'm emphasizing business is because we elected a president because we said he had business acumen. Okay, well, this same business ideology is the broken system that we are perpetuating when we are now seeing the downsizing of American jobs, of America and its work industry. So that, and a large part of that has been seen via the trucking industry and a lot of the truckers who had jobs and job security, but they don't have that now. And the 9 to 5 jobs that they're now trying to go back and get because their trucking jobs are just fading away, and they still got bills. They have to eat, they have to live, they have children, they have a house, they have cars, they have to have money in order to sustain themselves. And it's not working out that way because that downsizing mentality that was a broken system has now been spread through a whole country. So they've not only applied it in certain businesses, now they're applying it to a whole country, and it's going to have the same results. Why? It's historical. It's nothing new under the sun. I've been studying these business practices to include schooling for over 20 years. So I've seen a lot. So I can explain it a little bit better and simplify it in it where needed so other people can understand the correlation to your mental health, not just your finances, but your mental health, because money comes and goes, but your mental health, that is a part of the health, like your heart working, your sight working, everything. It's directly connected to whether you get sick or whether you stay healthy. And a lot of people are not making that correlation, so they're not aware why they get so ill. Well, I was feeling so well, I'm exercising, but suddenly I fall sick. I'm eating right, I'm taking vitamins, but I fall ill. And I took care of myself. I kept my body temperature at the right temperature. All these steps that you did and that you took to ensure your health. But what you didn't understand is the positive correlation to mental health. And now that you're starting to understand that a lot better, you're able to take better care of yourself holistically as a whole person, as opposed to just targeted health care. So making these correlations and these linking these connections is important. So now when more people are in need of gainful employment, for example, than what they are truly reporting, we're now seeing more. Well, they're not really reporting it as much in the dinosaur media and information transmission as much as they are via social media and word of mouth. Social media has now become the word of mouth, and it's become high in integrity because people can show you better than they can tell you. So they go on social media and they show you as influencers what's going on, how these things are happening. And they have even compilations where they're piling up testimonials from individuals and showing, well, this person is saying it, and this in business, one person represents 10,000. So when you have more than one person saying the same thing, then you have a proper representation of people. So even in science, when we conduct studies and we're saying, well, we need the proper sampling so that we understand that this is the accurate picture, that we're painting here and how it applies to different people across the spectrum. So we're not being so compartmentalized when we're trying to say, well, this is something that a lot of people want to know about. This is an improvement a lot of people are demanding. This is a trending topic, a hot topic. That's why this is very important, because without that, we don't know. As scientists who go and write studies, they don't know and they won't know. They won't have the proper sampling size in order to say this is applicable to this extent, and that makes money sense. So now we go into the businesses and we implement these desirable changes. But without those testimonies, we can't have that. So it's vital that we're starting to see that more, and not having to rely on dinosaur media to tell us or dictate what we see, what we hear, what we learn, and what we know is fact. And then they later come around, when dinosaur media come around with their transmission, and direct us and say, well, we might have not had all the information. Now we have more information. So now we can give you more facts. But now you've played around with people's mental health to the point where they don't trust you. They don't want to hear what you have to say. You have lost their loyalty, because now they understand propaganda. They understand mixed facts, and they understand that mixed facts equal whole lies. Nobody wants that. So they go and they move on to something else. These current events are rapidly depleting mental health, because people need tangible life support to refrain from seemingly randomly going postal for the helplessness feeling that's derived by these government decisions. So we're seeing a lot of people say, well, they don't feel like they can live like this. And a lot of outcomes are happening because a lot of people are saying, well, if I can't live like this, then I'm going to do something else. So until they find something that's tangible that they can hold on to be more successful. But these decisions to hire a business executive is what won the vote for president. Yet it was the idea of hiring someone based on race and titles without substantial desirable skills, which oiled the slippery slopes to disqualify DEI hires, because the word that people heard was DEI hires were overqualified, yet they didn't have the aesthetically pleasing look. Which means that though they had the qualifications, they didn't look like the people who everybody wanted to hire. A lot of times people mention in history that corporate America was primarily white, and white corporate America, they did not want to integrate anyone who did not look white. So they developed these things called a DEI hire, which incorporated people of color, but they had to be extremely well qualified, to the point of being overqualified, in order to substantiate their presence in that organization. If I can say, I'm trying to say things nicely, y'all let me be nice. I'm just saying. So, for example, we see that a lot of people are aware of that. I've seen a lot of TikTok influencers, where the influencer was attempting to tell viewers, America is a white country where only whites are welcome. So they're saying they're aware that white corporate America was the lead in business in America, and they're saying, well, that's just the way it should be. They're saying they know that the military forces were primarily, well, completely white, and they had incorporated people of color during the Civil War, and that's because they were losing numbers. A lot of white people were dying, and they had an imbalance to the population of people of color versus the white America, who they really wanted the Americas to be primarily white. But they started to understand that in business and in war and in the militaries, we can't be all white because we will lose numbers. And that's one of the things that we should definitely look at when we're saying, you know, what the consequences are of having an all white country or society or whatever. So that helps to improve the mental health to understand, well, now you're making the connection more clear why we can't just do it that one-sided narrow way. It also is relevant to the point that um, having that sort of narrow mentality is limiting oneself because you don't understand that the global economy is not one-sided. Is diverse in every way. So you're limiting yourself not only to an aesthetic, but you're limiting yourself to ability, to how much money you can make. And that's really the key. You want to be more prosperous than what your ideology will permit you to be. So that's a major problem with the mental health. You're like, well, I'm doing everything that I can in order to generate more money, but I'm not getting there. Why? What's hindering me? What's preventing me from being as wealthy as I know I could be? Well, your target audience may not be expanded enough. So the whites only ideology, what we saw in history, was not enough. So they had to integrate people of color in order to expand, not just financially, but in um, what they offer. So your offerings and your ability to profit go hand in hand. And when you try to disconnect that relevancy, you end up with mental health problems because you can't understand, why am I not making the kind of money I should be? Why am I not where I feel like I should be? Why is it stagnant growth? Why is it stagnant development? Well, that's why. So when white people realized the true impacts of the whites only mentality, it was too late. Then they were asking for allies, but they burned those bridges because they started to say, well, no, we're going to go with the all white mentality. But they're not learning from the past mistakes, which are definitely trackable via social media, via books that people aren't reading, and online. Just Google. But anyway, an example of that is how we are knowing what is going on, but we're not changing it. And it's like I'm I feel like a lot of the people are saying that we are all tired of these events being, you know, the root cause of mental health decline. And it's only in retrospect, or after everything, after all the damage is done, that we start to say, oh, yeah, well, we needed to do something about that. We need to do something about that. People are like, we don't want to hear you tell us long after we've told you all the damages that these problems have caused, for you to come around and say, oh, let's fix it. And a lot of times, studies really only show the reports that say, well, the economy went into recession, and a lot of people, as a reason, who experienced that, they had a great decline in mental health. A lot of times they're not even talking about the mental health because people lose their lives, and that's more important to emphasize than people saying about how the impacts of mental health. But we need to understand that, because those same people who survived those experiences, they survive with these mental problems and this mental health decline that's perpetual in how people are continuing to grow and develop and raise the next generation. So that's epic. That's profound. We need to understand that, and we need to emphasize that, because that's also how we are getting the information that's driving what businesses are failing, what businesses thrive, what businesses will be created and be successful in the long term. So it's signaling to a lot of different things that we are not really talking about, and we kind of bury it because we'd rather talk about what we feel is more important. But to learn from history and to learn from these situations, we have to dig a little bit deeper because we are in a cyclical manner, repeating these mistakes when we're really just trying to repeat the processes which permit advancement. But we can't do that because we're so focused on saying that those things are intricacies that are irrelevant to advancement and growth. And that's not true. Um, we see what's happening and we need to understand the real numbers. That's the fact. And when we're not doing that, we're not understanding the real numbers. It's not a fantasy impacting a select people like we were told, like what was told. However, these things still, however, these things are still a problem, and people are like, "How is it still a problem?" Watch a couple of my episodes where I explain how business practices and hierarchy in America, how the hierarchy is repeating the same patterns via mimetic isomorphism, absorptive capacity, Pygmalion theory and golem theory and things like that, incentive theories and stuff like that. But let's look at schools and see how, let's look at the school systems. So you can track it via the development of free education, which is also mixed with the facts learned from ancient books of faith. For example, in those books of faith, they saw that when you train a child in the way it should go, when it's older, it won't depart from that training. And it's like, oh, okay, so that's how we'll be able to keep this thing going. Look, I know a lot of people don't watch documentaries, so I'm going to break it down to you. So keep watching. So children enter school as impressionable, vulnerable minds, and they leave school at the age of 18, 21, 24, 28, and 30. That's a roundabout figure on average of when people finally graduate from school, whether it's high school and they stop going at 18, or college and they're like, okay, I'm 21 now, I'm gonna make my own decisions and I'm not gonna go to school anymore. I'm just gonna go to work from here. A lot of people start to go into the workforce at 18, 21, 24, 28, and 30. And that's important because those are the age groups where people like investors, stakeholders, stockholders, and rich people are using the numbers from those studies of observing those age groups to understand what direction we're going to take investments, what directions are we going to take businesses, what direction are we going to invest money into in order to for growth and development of society or communities or whatever it is they're going to invest in to make the economy grow and develop in the way that they want it to go. So all of that is signaling in that direction. So we have seen brick and mortar schools reach people in a way that nobody else could because everything is so compartmentalized. You have different facets of religion and faith and different places where people go and serve and service. And then you have different jobs and things like that. So the one place where everybody is and everybody comes from is school. So that's why it's important to observe that. And how did we see schools, brick and mortar schools, spread the ideology and practices to the unreachable? Well, they saw a spread to the unreachables via the evolution of online schooling. The one method of the online schooling advancing was taken from the advancement and the use and implementation process of computers and the World Wide Web via business and school, because the manufacturers and creators of the computer and the World Wide Web, they were like, well, this is a really profound tool. We have to implement this. But at first, the only people that could afford to use that were large corporations that had a lot of money. So they had to figure out a way to spread that and make and use some sort of relevancy so everybody felt urged to participate. And that's where you have the distant learning. Distant learning took place years in the 80s. So people were using computers to learn from a distance, so they can and it was higher learning. So somebody who was at the college level would learn a tool or something, a technique or something via the computer at a state where the teacher was in a different state. So each were in different states, but they were learning via the computer. And all of that information expanded the World Wide Web because it's all transpiring in the World Wide Web. So all that information transmission is building up the World Wide Web, which was completely empty prior to this kind of spread in the 80s. The computers were really starting to get popular in the 70s. So it started to spread even more in the 80s via these schooling methods. So another one of the ideologies, we might have to come back to that whole online schooling thing, but we have seen the online schooling method grow and advance in ways that is so profound. For example, the University of Phoenix was laughed at and scoffed at previously, mainly because people don't like growth. They don't like change. So they scoffed at it when the University of Phoenix online presented the idea of popularizing online schooling at the higher level learning. So when the University of Phoenix was like, oh, well, this is what we're going to do. And then it started to say, well, we need a target audience in order to make this work. So what they did was they took military families and people who had the will to learn, but they didn't have the ability to stay in one location. They was like, well, if you transfer schools because you transfer location because you deployed into another state or overseas in another country, you're going to lose your schooling credits. So what they did was they developed a relevancy and popularized because they filled a gap, an unserviced gap. So now they started to service people who wanted to complete their education but couldn't stay in the same location. So now they can complete their education and they don't have to be in the same state. They don't have to be in the same country. They can be anywhere in the world and school online. So that also fed the World Wide Web because it started to grow and develop because now it's pulling all that information and it's building AI. But we didn't talk about AI back then. We're talking about it now, though, a lot. So, yeah. Now let's get back to how it's relative to brick and mortar schools, because the brick and mortar schools implemented their ideology to a new platform, which was the online schooling. So the ideology of controlling information asymmetry, meaning how much information somebody has compared to how much information somebody else has. So they wanted to control information asymmetry via class, gender, and other barriers that keep us divided and sectioned off. What I call normatives that divide, meaning it's the norm, but it's meant for to keep things separate. For example, your left hand don't know what your right hand doing type of, division. But anyway, they also wanted to control knowledge hiding and knowledge sharing. But it was not as successful as it could have been because they thought, who thought scientists and people who academia who was trying to learn these things and practitioners, they all thought that information asymmetry and knowledge hiding and sharing were two separate things. No, it's all the same thing. It's all about how much information somebody has that this other person doesn't have. So that's about knowledge hiding and knowledge sharing, knowledge management, and communication transmission of sharing that knowledge or hiding that knowledge or information. So a lot of people weren't able to be as successful because they were taking along the brokenness and adding it to a new platform where it was like, okay, we're kind of starting fresh and we want to take all the successful measures that we learned and apply it to this fresh new platform. It didn't work out that way. And that's because you're mixing facts with non-facts, which is equal to confusion, division, misdirection, which all equals mental health failure. And we're seeing that in large part now. And it's like, how can so many people be deceived? Well, that's how, because school touches everyone. It's everywhere. And a lot of jobs and places of faith, different facets of our life, regardless of what we're doing, we're getting an education. So we go somewhere in order to get that education. We're going to school somewhere. So how can I simplify that? Well, I can simplify it this way. Here come the plushies. Here come the plushies. So we have these two bears that look alike. They say, well, hey, we look alike. Great, my friend. Yay. And they hug and say, we're going to be friends forever. Best pals forever. BFFs forever. And then you have this colorful, clever owl who comes into play. And the bear does this. Whenever it catches the clever owl, which has a tendency to be fairly clever and slippery. And the bear comes along and says, oh, why did you do the clever, colorful owl like that? You don't have to worry about that. That colorful, clever owl doesn't look like us. You and I are the same. You're my neighbor. I look like you and you look like me, and we can work together. We're best friends forever. Okay, I won't worry about it then. And then you run out of those clever, colorful owls. And what you have now, this is all you have. And then one day the bear is just minding his business, and here comes this one. Hey, what did you do that for? Well, I ran out of colorful, clever owls. Well, you said you would never do me like that. Why are you doing me like that? I trusted that you would not do that. You're my friend. What, 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 why are you doing this to me? I can't live like this. I trusted you. You said you would not do me like this because we were friends. We were allies. I'm your neighbor. I look just like you. I'm your friend. I eat at your dinner table. We go to parties together. Now, what did you learn? Well, what you learned is the big takeaway is mental health is directly connected to treatment from others. It's like you have to understand, regardless of who you think are your allies, everything that you are witnessing and justifying being done to someone else, you've also justified it being done to you. And that's what we call the FAFO era, the fool around and find out era. We're coming to understand that white privilege will not allow the privileged to follow rules. We know that already. And we're coming to see what the consequences are. It's the way they were trained as children. So it's not necessarily their fault, and something that you can easily redirect, because it's easier to teach than it is to redirect or reteach. And they learn this all in school. So it's very difficult to retrain that brokenness into something more positive and more accurate. Most importantly, more accurate. You have to teach people accurately facts. And all those things can lead to unhoused, or like you saw with the teddy bears, the inability to live like that. We have seen the beta state of that consequence and behavior when we look at the state of California and we see the level of unhoused people who live in California. And we saw a lot of Californians say, well, they can't live here. And a lot of the Californians was like, well, this is where I grew up. I'm not moving. And then they raise the prices and they say, well, we're not raising the prices on everyone, just a select few. But later, as you saw with the teddy bears, that was not true because you justified it being done. Now it set a precedent. Now that precedent is applicable to all those people, whether you were from the perspective of observing to now experiencing, because you justified it is now a norm. It's expected. So when we see it on a larger scale, we can't claim ignorance. We can't claim we didn't know. We can't claim we didn't see it coming. We did, but we believed, like the teddy bear said, that you wouldn't do me like that because we look like each other. Why would you do me like that? Ran out of other people to do it to. So over the past 20 years, when I was writing in academia about inclusion, I guess I should have explained what I meant, because a lot of times people, they thought that when I was writing about inclusion, they thought that I was saying to include diverse people. We already did that. So there was no need for me to write about that because we already saw that including diverse people was profitable. So that wasn't what I was talking about. What I was talking about was something else, but I didn't know that I was triggering people when I wrote that 10 years ago. So when I continued to write it and in different phrases, I was unknowingly triggering people to think some other way, but they weren't being forthcoming, just like this little bear. Even though he's smaller than the bigger bear, and probably the bigger bear is stronger than him, but it's that unaware, that level of trust, that level of, okay, I believe what you're telling me, is that prevented the bigger bear from being prepared and being ready to do what they witnessed being done to the colorful owl, the colorful clever owl. I'm just saying, this is why the decline in mental health is the way it is. And I'm breaking it down as simple as I possibly can and using these little teddy bears to explain and show it to you in a more tangible way so you can see it more plainly. But the trigger words were triggering the wrong thing. What I was saying when I was writing it was the inclusion of um, the other communities that weren't being reached. When I wrote about inclusion, I was talking about people in the vulnerable communities because they had been overlooked for so long. Meanwhile, they kept breaking every forced glass ceiling with every opportunity. Who is that? The people who couldn't leave home due to phobias, and they just needed to be reached right where they were. A lot of times we see with the online schooling and online e-commerce, with e-business, because you're conducting business online, we're seeing that those communities are being reached, and that's been taking place over the last 20 years. But we're taking a step backwards where we think, oh, we shouldn't include, you know, clever, colorful people, clever, smart, colorful people. That wasn't, we're taking a step back. There's no going back to try to say, oh, that doesn't work, when we have substantial evidence and studies that prove that that does work. What we're saying and what we're trying to find is how profitable, how lucrative it can be if we continue to incorporate people who have phobias of leaving their home. They're still intelligent. They're still human. They're still really smart people. We just got to reach them so we can tap into that untapped money. You know what I'm saying? And we can also use people who have these neurodivergence, people who are on spectrum. We've seen how we've implemented those people who have Down syndrome. We put them into the workforce. We put them in school, and we stopped saying things like, "Oh, they can't graduate from college. They can't graduate from high school. They can't get, various degrees." But then when we started allowing the opportunity, we saw that they broke those forced glass ceilings, and because they had the opportunity, they advanced really well and very successfully, and it was lucrative. And now you've reached the untapped market because now you've implemented more people, and now you have more numbers, and now you have more finances, and now you have more generational wealth because you got real numbers now, and you're not limiting yourselves because of that limit of awareness to reality and facts. So, why was I talking about including them into society more than what they were? Because we were seeing in business, we were seeing that a lot of the studies and the business performers were not reaching they weren't realized. They weren't reaching the goals like they could, and they wasn't hitting those marks. So it was like we have a idea, and we know how much money it should generate, but it wasn't getting that kind of money. It wasn't getting that kind of consumer interest either. And it was because of the things that were thought to be intricacies that were not relative to producing the kind of wealth that they saw was being hindered, because they thought that those intricate details were insignificant. And they brushed it off and said, well, that doesn't make money. I would work with those people. I was working with people who had those were classified to be on the spectrum, were classified to be unreachable. I was working with those people, and I was like, man, what a waste. You could be doing so much more if you were incorporated into these things, because I saw here in my job where I'm getting paid to work. They need that kind of information of where I'm sitting here working for myself, generating money on the side. We all do that. So I'm generating a little money on the side of my 9 to 5 and helping these people who can't be reached. And I'm like, my God, you have exactly what we're looking for in the business world, but we don't even know you exist because it's two separate entities. We need to incorporate the two. So that's what I've been writing about over the last 20 years or so. A significant point to why that's been successful is because those people who are in the vulnerable communities and on the spectrum, they have accepted their uniqueness, and they are not limited by those understandings. They embrace it, and they don't try to control it. They make advancements because of it, because of those limitations. And when they're given the opportunity, they are advancing the world. They're advancing the workplace that they're in, and they're also advancing the world, because it was not about limiting them. Now you're seeing people who have one leg that's missing. They're breaking forced glass ceilings, because they're thinking outside the box in a way that people with two legs just can't think. But why? Because they have two legs. Why do they have to think that way? And the possibility of more people having lost one leg is far less than people who have two legs. So in business, it wasn't financially beneficial or thought to be beneficial to dwell on that market. So they focused on the market for the general population, but they didn't realize how they were limiting themselves. But now we can see what's the big takeaway. We see the big takeaway is it's not about the Pygmalion golem theories and things like that. It's not about incentive theories and motivational theories and things like that. It's about, and it's always been about, opportunities. It's always been about opportunities. Everything is about opportunity. That's why they used to have a saying, what creates leaders? Is it because they were born a leader, or was it the opportunity to become a leader? And we find it's a little bit of both when it comes down to it. However, we also see when we look at the people who are in the vulnerable communities, such as people with Down syndrome. Let's stick with those, that group of people, for example. We saw when we stopped saying they can't never go to high school and we started allowing them to enter high school, we saw that when we said, well, they'll never graduate high school, they started to graduate high school. And then we started to say, well, they can't go to college. They started to go to college and they started to graduate college. And then we started to put them in the workforce, learning different things. And it was like, we keep seeing it with every opportunity that they're given. They're not only advancing our understanding of their limitations, but they're realizing a new potential in themselves and advancing the way scientists understand the study of the brain, the way medical reports report the abilities of the brain and the human behavior. We're seeing how that's also impacting the workforce and how we provide products that cater to advancements to people who don't have problems and don't have these limitations, but it's also advancing them and it's lucrative to everyone across the board. Whereas before, we were so limited because our level of understanding is that of people who don't have to think about those intricacies because it's not their problem, because it's not their unique perspective. But now, when we see the unique perspective of those people, we're starting to see how much more money we're getting. Just like when we saw how all white corporate America advanced when they started to incorporate the colorful, clever owls that came from somewhere else. It's not it's not happening in a vacuum. It's nothing new under the sun. It's all relative to how we are seeing our mental health decline as a global crisis. It's not just America. It is happening to everyone because as we are seeing how America is intertwined in business and other aspects of life with these other countries all over the world, we're seeing that America and the prosperity and the mental decline that it's having is affecting everyone across the board and across genre, in film, in industries, in schooling, in every facet of life. And we're not controlling things the way the brick and mortar school system try to control it via information asymmetry, knowledge hiding, and knowledge sharing practices. We're not able to control it that way, so we're seeing a lack of trust in information transmission because you told us that you could, but our mental health declined when we realized that was not the facts. Facts are stubborn. And because facts are stubborn, you can't hide it. You can't say, well, it was because of something else, because eventually that fact is going to resurface and come to the top. And then they're going to say, well, you told me it was that when factually it was this. And that's why we have to stop being so compartmentalized and trusting that what happens to one isn't going to happen to all. It all sets a precedent. And that precedent is affecting the health and the mental health of everyone. And because it's affecting us in that manner, it's declining our safety as well. There's a great decline in our safety because a lot of people are mentally snapping and we don't know what to expect. For example, there was a sheriff that has been ended early in life because he shot a young man fatally, and the father who is likely mentally snapped because he can't understand the contradiction in you're supposed to be here to serve and protect and help, but you ended a young life so early that and without any kind of logic that I can understand. So now mentally, I can't grasp a hold of reality. So now the focus is to get rid of what's blocking the mental decline, what's blocking mental health being desirable. So when he got rid of the person who was hindering his mental health, he's now in jail and everybody's looking at him like, why did you do that? Why did you randomly do that to that particular person? And it was not random. And it was very specific, but we're pushing under the rug all of these links and correlations, and therefore preventing ourselves from being able to see that this is a cyclical behavior. It is not random and is happening more often than not, because this kind of oil that we're lubing these slippery slopes with is not stopping, it's not ending. And we're constantly trying to justify these injustices and thinking there's no consequences. There's a financial detriment and there's a detriment to life. So, with that being said, I've run out of time, but keep watching these episodes. Go back and binge watch a couple of episodes. I try to say these things as nicely as I possibly can and to be as simple as I can so that anybody who's watching, young, old, indifferent, with your age, because age is nothing but a number, your level of understanding. Let's put it that way. I try to phrase things in a way that whatever your level of understanding is, you will understand what I'm saying. And I tried to use these plush toys today to help improve your ability to make those connections and links. Other influencers may watch this because you may share and they may bring this informational message to you in a way that's more preferable to you. So I do encourage you to share these episodes, and maybe your influencer will be able to mansplain it to you or break it down in a way that's more acceptable or palatable to your level of understanding. So please like, share, and subscribe. Ring the bell so you'll know the next time I come on. And you can also ask Eddie, who does history on Thursdays. You can ask him to make that correlation a little stronger for you if you have a higher level of understanding and you would like to link that to, something more historically profound, as opposed to being as elementary as I try to break these things down to you. So in some episodes, I do present a more higher level understanding, but in this episode, I felt it necessary to break it down just a little bit more simply and use some visuals to help improve your understanding and your ability. Also, I have a book you can go and purchase, Generational Wealth, Information Asymmetry, and Your Success. It's available at lulu.com, or you can go to Amazon. You can also ask for it wherever books are sold, but it breaks things down so you can understand. And it's a very brief, kind of read. So you don't have to do a whole lot of reading to get the same understanding that, you can have if you just glance over the book. It's only 123 pages, 1, 2, 3. So it's very easy to understand and read. So it's a fast read, big print, breaks down definitions, and it's tangible so you can revert back to it when you're trying to, recall things that you need to recall about what it said. That's been my time for today. Please remember, mental health is physical wealth. See you next episode. Mental health is physical wealth.